Hello and welcome everyone to another RIS interview. I'm absolutely delighted today to be talking to Dr. Kazushige Kobayashi, who is the Associate Professor at the College and Graduate School of International Relations at Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, Japan. Kazu, you're also a research associate at the Center on Conflict, Development and Peace Building of the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva, Switzerland. Kazu has written an article with Keith Krause and Xinyu Yuan for BISA's Review of International Studies, or RIS as we're commonly known, on pathways to socialization, China, Russia, and the competitive norm socialization in a changing global order. Welcome, Kazu, and congratulations to all three of you on the publication of the article.
Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to present our article.
Wonderful. So it's lovely to finally be able to talk to you because I know we've been planning this. Well, let's get straight on to the questions that I have for you. I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about yourself and your academic journey. How did you become interested in this area of research?
Okay, so a little bit about myself. I'm currently associate professor at Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto. So I'm in Kyoto now. Very humid here. But over the last 12 years, I have lived and worked in many different places across the world, including New York, Washington, D.C., Moscow, Geneva, and Tokyo. So based on these experiences, my research focuses on global international relations theory, global IR, peace building, Russian foreign policy, among other things. And between 2018 and 2022, I was a part of a research project, collaborative research project at the Center on Conflict, Development, Peace Building as a graduate institute in Geneva, which looked at how alternative actors are emerging in the field of peace and development. So with my CCDP colleagues, Keith Krause and Xinyu Yuan, Oliver Sonke, we completed a 4-year research project on the role of China, Japan, and Russia in reshaping global norms and practices in the field of peace and development. So this article published by Review of International Studies actually came out as one of the output of this collaborative research project.
Very, very interesting. So there'll be many people listening to this interview who haven't read your article yet. Could you give us a brief outline of it and yes, what it's all about?
Yeah. So, well, the conventional view is that international socialization is mostly about conformity and cooperation. In contrast, our article argues that socialization can also be a competitive practice aimed at challenging Western hegemony in global politics. And our article makes this argument in 5 parts. Now I don't have time to explain each of these 5 parts, so very briefly, our theory part and the methodology part develops an alternative concept of what we call competitive socialization, which is a practice of learning and internalizing Western supported norms for the purpose of challenging existing power hierarchy in world politics. We also present a classification table that compares and contrasts different types and practices socialization so that we can contextualize our research and argument. And then in the case study part, where I think case study part is a part that most people are interested. So in the case study part, we apply this framework to the cases of China's internalization of peacekeeping norms and also Russia's internalization of multilateral development norms. And these illustrative case studies demonstrate that the internalization of Western norms has enabled Beijing and Moscow to challenge Western hegemony in the policy field on peace and development. So that basically is a very brief outline of our article.
Wonderful. It sounds very, very interesting. So what would the main takeaways of the article be?
Well, in recent years, there has been a lot of talks about how to integrate so-called non-Western insights into the research of international relations. So our article shows that how to do this. One of the ways how to do this, how to rethink and define existing international relations theories by incorporating historical experiences from Asia, Eurasia, and other parts of the world. So the main takeaway is that we point out in our article that conventional socialization research in international relations, it is mostly informed by Western history, and especially the socialization of Eastern European states into NATO and the European Union after the Cold War. We show that actually this Eastern European socialization, well, maybe not so socialized if you look at Poland and Hungary today, but well, if we look at the Eastern European socialization, it is mostly a very unusual case from a global point of view, where Eastern European post-communist states and elites internalized Western norms and practices, mostly and primarily driven by a desire to cooperate with Western powers. In our article, our main argument is that elsewhere in the world, so-called non-Western actors often learn and internalize Western norms, not only to cooperate with the West, but also to go against the West sometimes, to challenge the existing power hierarchy in global politics. So in a nutshell, our argument is that international socialization can also be a practice, competitive practice, driven by competitive motivation, the motives. And this is one of the main findings of our research article.
And did you face any challenges in this kind of research?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, so this article was written as a part of a collaborative research project. To our surprise, our research process initially went very smoothly between 2018 and 2020. For example, our research team collectively conducted nearly 100 interviews with government officials, UN officials, civil society representatives, experts in many different cities, including Geneva, New York, Beijing, Moscow, and Tokyo. So initially, our process was going very smoothly, in part supported by the very, very generous funding offered by the Swiss National Science Foundation. So this was the initial 2 years of our project. And then came the COVID pandemic. I think it affected every one of us in certain ways. And then we have to adjust our research plan after February 2020. And this was a tremendous challenge for our research team because our research team was composed by 4 independent researchers, all affiliated with CCDP Research Center, but still we have to coordinate in the time of profound uncertainty. So at that time, I was a postdoc coordinating this research project. And I kept in touch with everyone in the research team and sent out weekly reviews, who is doing what tasks, research tasks each week. And then we try to minimize our uncertainty. Well, maybe sometimes I was even sending these weekly reviews in New Year and Christmas and so on. Maybe this is like a Japanese micromanagement skills. But anyway, I think we managed pretty well to mitigate this uncertainty. It was fortunate for us that we did a lot of interviews right before the pandemic started. But in the end, we accumulated so much wealth of qualitative data that we managed to produce more than 6 articles, journal articles. So this article published by Review of International Studies is just one of them. Other articles have been published by International Studies Quarterly, Third World Quarterly, and other journals. And also there are more research articles coming in the next few months, hopefully not years, months, yes. So this is how we managed our research process. It was challenging, but also very fruitful and constructive.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. That sounds amazing. So could you talk a little bit about the practical implications of your findings?
All right, so the main practical implication of our research is that the diffusion of Western norms may not be always beneficial for Western policymakers or Western officials, at least from a strategic point of view. For example, let's talk about China and peacekeeping operations. We point out in our article that in 1960s, 1970s, China adamantly opposed peacekeeping operations, UN peacekeeping operations. They said that China said that in 1960s, for example, peacekeeping operations are kind of imperial intervention into post-colonial states. And many Western policymakers at that time thought and felt that China's rejection of peacekeeping norms was a kind of challenge to the post-war liberal international order. So that was the story back then. Nowadays, China has completely and fully internalized UNPKO norms. Even the United Nations has awarded some medals and awards to China in this regard. And somehow, throughout the research process, we found out that Western policymakers nowadays feel that this is also a kind of threat to Western primacy in world politics, that China is taking a lot of leadership. China is supporting peacekeeping process, expanding its influence in the UN. And this is what we mean by saying that the diffusion of Western supported norms may not be always of strong interest for Western states. In my personal opinion, I think this insight, this practical insight, can be applicable to other fields. For example, responsibility to protect, R2P. Nowadays, a lot of Western officials and policymakers say that, for example, when China opposes R2P, this is a threat to liberal international order. But in my personal opinion, I would say that it would be even more problematic for many Western policymakers if China completely internalizes R2P norm and start intervening into conflict-affected states on supposedly humanitarian grounds across the world. So this is some of the things that we came up with in our research article, that basically there is often an unstated assumption that the diffusion of Western norms can be beneficial for the West. This can be the case sometimes, but not always. So our concept of competitive socialization provides us with some food for thought to think critically about the future of global orders in the years to come.
Okay. So you've talked a little bit about the various articles coming out, but could you tell us the next steps for the research?
Okay, so our research project was completed in April 2022. So a few months ago, we finished the project. But then now the CCDP, the research center, and our research team has just started a new follow-on project, also supported by the generous funding of the Swiss National Science Foundation. And even though I moved to Kyoto, I remain a part of the research team as a research partner. And actually, I'm going to Geneva in the next few weeks. If there is no problem with the flight to Europe, I'm going to Geneva again to do team meetings and workshops. So the previous project, as I briefly mentioned, was mostly focused on macro level, upper level, for example, UN contestation. So we looked at, for example, how Chinese, Japanese, and Russian approach to peace and development affects global norms. So that was our focus for the previous project. The new project, on the other hand, we built on these insights from the previous project, but shift our focus to more local dynamics and investigate how the presence of these alternative actors in the field of peace and development affects local power dynamics in conflict-affected states in Asia and also in Africa. So our goal for the next few years is to investigate how the presence of these alternative actors can lead to the transformation of global norms and practice in the field of peace and development. So that's our plan for next few years.
Well, that sounds very fascinating. I look forward to the next stage. So thank you very much for giving us an insight into your research and for agreeing to be interviewed. It's they're proving very popular on the website. For those of you who are listening to this and are keen to learn more, you can read Kazu's full article in the current issue of the Review of International Studies. That's the July 2022 issue. It's open access, so it's freely available to everyone, although if you are a BISA member, you can, of course, access all the articles in the journal by logging onto your account. While you are here, please do look at the BISA website, which is www.bisa.ac.uk. You can learn all about the association and all the wonderful benefits a BISA membership will bring you. So please do have a look. And with that, I just wanted to thank you very much, Kazu. It's been very interesting. Thank you for being interviewed again. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.